Welcome to the deep dive. So today we're really getting into a fascinating set of sources that a listener sent over.
Yeah, these are interesting documents, notes, some personal accounts.
Right, and when you piece them together, they tell this pretty gripping story, a world just thrown into chaos almost overnight.
Exactly.
Our goal here is to unpack how this global crisis, kicked off by just a few specific events, leads to such a terrifyingly fast breakdown of everything we rely on.
It's not just what happens, is it? It's the why. Why so quick? And the sources even hint at maybe someone pulling the strings.
Get to. It's a lot to cover. These sources really do lay bare how surprisingly fragile our whole interconnected system is.
Yeah, they show a scenario moving with, honestly, shocking speed. It exposes vulnerabilities you just don't think about day to day.
Okay, let's dive in then. Where does it start? What's the spark in these documents?
Well, the sources point right to this devastating trigger.
Huh.
Bombs. Near simultaneous bombings hitting incredibly symbolic and strategic targets. Mecca, Medina, and Riyadh, right during morning prayers. And the initial blame, according to the sources, falls on a radical Shiite group.
Wow. Okay, so the impact must have been immediate.
Instantaneous.
Yeah.
And huge.
Yeah.
This isn't contained, It destabilizes Saudi Arabia right away, ignites this brutal civil war. You've got different factions turning on each other, the Wahhabis, Sunnis, the Shiite minority, old grievances just erupting.
And it doesn't stop there, presumably.
No, it spreads like wildfire. Kuwait, Oman, the Emirates. The whole region is quickly pulled into the chaos.
And the biggest immediate global hit from that has to be oil, right?
Absolutely. The sources really hammer this point. Saudi Arabia alone.
Yeah.
You're talking about losing maybe a quarter, even up to a third of the world's daily oil supply. Just gone.
So this isn't just another tragic bombing. This is targeted, strategic, aimed right at the global energy system.
Precisely. But what's really chilling reading these sources is that this wasn't completely unforeseen. Not by everyone, anyway.
How?
There's this character introduced, Eddie. He had this very specific background. Turns out, 8 years before all this happens, he wrote a report.
A report about what?
It feels eerily prophetic now. It basically mapped out how easily religious tensions could be, weaponized to destabilize the whole region.
Okay, that's one thing, but you said specific background.
Right. Critically, his report also identified these vulnerable points. He called them nodes within the global oil distribution network.
Nodes, like weak links.
Exactly. Think major pipelines, key refineries, strategic shipping lanes, choke points, places where if you hit them, the damage is catastrophic for the whole system.
Okay, I see where this is going. Don't tell me.
Yeah. The sources reveal that within just 24 hours of those first bombs in Saudi Arabia, 7 of the critical nodes Andy had identified in his report, they were hit.
7. Wow. So not random.
Doesn't seem like it. It strongly suggests a coordinated attack planned in advance, targeting the system's precise weaknesses, validated in a horrible way by Andy's own analysis years earlier.
Knowing that, understanding the system's jugular like that, it must have really affected him.
Oh, definitely. The sources describe it, giving him this sort of doom-laden fascination with the end of the world. It wasn't just academic for him.
Did he try to prepare?
He did, yeah. Years before, he was looking into buying a remote property, even thinking about moving the family to New Zealand, somewhere safer, away from the population centers he knew would be hit hardest.
But they didn't go.
No. And the sources touch on why. Just everyday life, really. Earning a living, the kid's school, paying bills. For his wife, Jenny, the threat probably felt abstract, faded into the background.
Understandable.
But for Andy, that knowledge, that map of how it could all fall apart,
yeah,
it was always there, just under the surface.
Okay, so the spark's lit in the Middle East. These critical oil nodes are hit globally. The ripple effect starts. How fast does it spread, according to these accounts?
Terrifyingly fast. The sources talk about an immediate huge jump in oil prices and predictions that, drastic measures were coming. Swiftly.
And swiftly is the word.
Absolutely. Within days, the collapse is being felt everywhere, even far from the initial conflict. The sources give us a really detailed look at the UK situation.
And how prepared was the UK?
According to these documents, not prepared at all, particularly vulnerable.
In what way?
Massive reliance on food imports. For one, practically zero strategic food reserves. Food basically just existed in the supply chain, on the trucks, on the supermarket shelves.
So when that chain breaks?
There's no buffer, nothing to fall back on. It runs out fast.
What about the government? What did they do?
The response described is rapid Yeah, but also quickly overwhelmed. They announce emergency oil conservation rules. Then, very quickly, rationing.
Rationing what?
First petrol, then food.
Okay.
And, almost inevitably, as things spiral, martial law is imposed. Curfews, trying desperately to keep some lid on things.
There's that scene, isn't there, the Prime Minister's press conference?
Yeah, that's incredibly telling. The sources capture the pressure cooker atmosphere. Publicly, he's trying to project calm, calling it a blip.
But privately.
His internal thoughts, recorded in one source, are basically, we're screwed. And the journalists, they know. They immediately zero in on the only thing that matters. Oil supply. How much is left?
And it wasn't just supplies. Basic services started failing, too.
Rapidly. Widespread power cuts hit the country.
Why? What caused that?
Well, a couple of things according to the sources. Power allocation authority gets pushed down to regional levels, which are just swamped. And crucial energy imports from France, Russia, they just stop.
Do the lights go out?
Pretty much. Power ends up being rationed maybe just a few hours a day in some places. Or it just disappears completely in others. It shows how fast that modern infrastructure we depend on just unravels.
So as the big picture collapses, the sources zoom in, right? They follow a specific family.
Yeah, they bring it right down to the human level.
Yeah.
We see Andy, the guy who wrote the report. He's actually stuck in Iraq when it all kicks off.
And he's trying to reach his family.
Making these frantic, desperate calls home. To his daughter, Leona, who's at university in Norwich, and his wife, Jenny, who happens to be away in Manchester.
What's he telling them?
The message is stark. Urgent. Don't go home. Don't stay where you are. Get supplies, tins, water, anything, and get to someone called Jill's house.
You can feel the fear.
Absolutely, the father's raw terror. And it contrasts with Jenny's initial reaction as sort of disbelief, perhaps, but that dissolves fast into urgency as the news gets worse.
And Jenny tries to get back from Manchester.
Yeah, and the sources detail this harrowing journey.
Yeah.
Trains stop running, coaches too. She gets onto the motorway, but it's chaos. There's a blockade. She witnesses police shooting a truck driver.
Oh, my God.
Eventually, she has to abandon her car. Roadblocks, razor wire soldiers.
Yeah.
She can't get through.
So what does she do?
She decides to walk across London, and the sources describe the city just decaying rapidly. She sees bodies in the streets. It's a really visceral picture of how quickly society just breaks down.
And meanwhile, the daughter, Leona.
She's with her boyfriend, Dan, trying to get supplies in Norwich. They're at a Tesco, buying up whatever food and water they can, emptying her bank account.
Panic buying starts.
Yeah, they realize it's starting just as they're there.
Yeah.
Crowds are arriving. And amidst all this, Leona's younger brother, Jacob, who's with her, asks this just heart-wrenching, innocent question.
What does he ask?
Is the world going to end?
Oh, wow.
And it's that contrast, isn't it? His innocence versus Leona's dawning realization that this is way, way worse than just being difficult for a while.
The sources then describe a really intense scene at a service station, right? Beaufort Services?
Yeah, that's a brutal snapshot of the collapse. They end up there maybe hoping for safety, supplies. But the shift's manager, Mr. Stewart, he's got this grim, cynical outlook, joking about getting happy slapped by a mob.
And does it happen?
Horrifyingly, yes. A mob attacks. They try to barricade the doors, but it fails almost instantly. One woman, Ruth, tries to appeal to their shared nationality, shouting, "We're Brits, for Christ's sake."
Doesn't work.
No. She's met with violence. Some of them, including Jenny and the kids who've arrived by then, manage to escape through a revolving door, but they have to leave others behind.
In the station.
It's set on fire, burns down. It's just this stark illustration of how quickly solidarity evaporates, becomes survival of the fittest.
So they eventually make it to this Jill's house in Shepherd's Bush, Leona, Jacob, and Jenny.
Yes, they find temporary shelter there. But even then, the sources describe constant fear. These nighttime gangs, they call them the bad boys, just looting, preying on houses. They hear break-ins nearby, screaming.
It sounds terrifying.
And then they find something that just hammers home the total loss of order. Their neighbors, Mr. and Mrs. DiMarcio.
What happened to them?
Murdered.
Yeah.
Brutally. And it's the final signal, really. The police, any authority, it's just gone. As one character says, it's jungle time.
And on top of all that horror, there's a personal sting for Leona, too.
Yeah, her little brother Jacob, in his innocence, just thinks her boyfriend Dan has dumped her because he's not there. Another layer of pain amidst the chaos.
Okay, so society's falling apart, violence is everywhere. But then the sources introduce something else, something operating behind the scenes.
Exactly. Against this backdrop of collapse, we learn about this hidden group. They're called the 160.
The 160, who are they?
Well, we get insights from another character, Mike. He seems to know something about them, and his perspective is unsettling. He believes this group doesn't just influence governments.
What then?
He says governments are merely a tool for them. He calls 160 the actual scaffolding of the global system, implying they're fundamental, structural, and maybe even orchestrating the collapse itself.
Orchestrating it. To what end? What's their motive, according to Mike?
It sounds chillingly pragmatic. Control. Control over the essentials. Power, water, food. But not for everyone.
What do you mean?
His information suggests their goal is to preserve only a significant portion of the population. It implies a deliberate global triage, deciding who gets the resources to survive.
And they have real power, not just theoretical.
Mike claims they have deep infiltration. He mentions the UK's emergency committee, Cobra, the Cabinet Office Briefing Room A, right? The top-level crisis group.
Yeah.
He claims 5 of the 8 members on Cobra during this crisis are insiders, working for the 160.
Wow. That suggests immense control. Do the sources hint at how long they've been around?
There's a brief but really provocative mention from another character, Ash. He hints at this deep historical influence, suggests the 160 might have even helped set the stage for Hitler in World War II.
Seriously, why?
As a way to stifle communism, apparently. It paints this picture of a group with huge long-term influence, operating unseen for decades, maybe longer.
So if the 160 are this powerful hidden hand, is anyone opposing them?
Yes. Mike, the character providing this intel, describes his own group. He says they've been working off the grid for 40 years, specifically trying to expose the 160.
Have they had much success?
That sounds like it's been incredibly difficult. He says they've gathered limited info, mainly the number, 160, and that there's a core group of decision makers called the 12.
Any clues to their origins?
Mike drops a hint about a possible historical link, maybe involving figures like Robert Kennedy, suggesting this struggle, or the group itself, might go back decades.
Can this hidden power stuff isn't just background context, right? It becomes very real, very personal in the story.
Absolutely. The sources introduce this operative, an assassin, named Ash, described as the Ghost, and he's apparently sent by the 160.
Sent to do what?
His target is specific.
Yeah.
Terrifyingly specific. Find and presumably eliminate Leona, Andy's daughter.
Leona? Why her?
The sources explicitly link it back to her father. It's something to do with her daddy's work. It strongly implies Andy's knowledge. Maybe that report on the vulnerable node somehow connects Leona to the 160's plans or system, making her a threat.
So Ash tracks her down.
Yes, the sources follow his pursuit, leading him right to Jill's house where Leona, Jenny, and Jacob are hiding.
Yeah.
It sets up this direct confrontation.
And what happens?
In this moment of sheer desperation, Jenny Leona's mother manages to shoot Ash, hits him on the stairs, injures him in the collarbone.
So the threat becomes violently real for them.
Exactly. And Mike's assessment of Ash underlines how dangerous he is.
Mm-hmm.
Lethal, he calls him. Their best field operative works alone.
Does Mike want him dead?
No, the opposite. Mike's group desperately wants to capture Ash alive, to get information out of him about the 160. Mike's actually worried Ash might die from the gunshot wound before they can reach him.
So where do the sources leave things after that confrontation? What's the immediate aftermath?
It's grim. Tragically, Andy, Leona's father, dies in that struggle at Jill's house.
Oh, no.
We see Jenny's grief, obviously, but also Leona having to step up, showing this incredible strength to lead them out of there.
They escape London.
Yeah, Leona guides Jenny and Jacob out of the city, through the chaos, and they eventually find refuge somewhere unexpected.
Where?
In the countryside, with a community of historical reenactors.
Reenactors.
Yeah, and it's an interesting detail, isn't it? It highlights how, in this collapsed world, those pre-oil fundamental skills, making soap, baking bread from scratch, suddenly become incredibly valuable again.
What news do they get from the outside world?
It's bleak. They hear snippets on wind-up radios. Government safe zones are failing, not just in the UK, but globally. Supplies are running out everywhere. People are turning on each other. America, they hear, has been hit particularly hard.
We also briefly revisit a character from the beginning, don't we?
Yeah, Fareed, back in Iraq. There's a moment of reflection from his perspective, thinking about the layers of blame for his country's destruction, external forces, internal conflicts. It's complex.
And then there's this final feeling from Jenny right at the end of these source fragments.
Yes, she has this profound, quite unsettling feeling that something else is still coming. She calls it, very specifically, a correction.
A correction, what does that mean? Natural consequences or Something else.
The sources don't spell it out. It could be the brutal natural fallout of the collapse. Or, given everything else, maybe it implies another more deliberate action by the 160 to shape whatever comes next. It's left hanging.
There's a brief moment of hope, though. A reunion.
There is. The family, Jenny, Leona, Jacob, they have this emotional reunion somewhere near Highgate in London. And strangely, they find this little convenience store nearby that's almost untouched.
Like a pocket of normality?
Maybe. Or just random luck amidst the devastation. But then there's one final, really chilling detail.
Go on.
Leona suddenly remembers something. Seeing a mysterious face years ago on a trip to New York with her dad, Andy. And she connects that face, that memory, to the current threat. To Ash, maybe. To the 160. Suggesting this wasn't spontaneous. That the 160's plan, and maybe their interest in her family specifically, goes back a very, very long time.
Wow. Okay, so stepping back from the details of these sources, this deep dive has taken us through a terrifying scenario. Fictional, yes, but it feels disturbingly plausible in places.
It really does. It hammers home the fragility, doesn't it? How quickly everything we take for granted, energy, food distribution, water safety, can just vanish when the underlying systems break.
And it shows that stark contrast between, say, official government responses trying to manage things and the brutal reality people face on the ground.
Absolutely. And then layered on top is this unsettling idea central to these sources of these powerful hidden forces, the 160, operating above governments, maybe influencing huge global events.
It's a lot to process, but beneath the collapse and the hints of conspiracy, it's also fundamentally a story about survival, isn't it?
Definitely. That basic human drive to survive, to protect your family when everything else is stripped away, that comes through really strongly.
So thinking about all this, looking at our own world through the lens these sources provide, what does it leave you, the listener, with?
Yeah, I mean, given how fast the scaffolding of normal life just crumbled in this scenario, how vulnerable things were shown to be, it makes you wonder, doesn't it?
Wonder what?
What skills, what knowledge is really essential, for navigating futures that might be unpredictable? Whether the disruption comes from external shocks like that initial crisis,
or, as these sources suggest, maybe from the deliberate actions of hidden powers.
Exactly. And that final thought from Jenny, a correction. What could that mean for the future trajectory of a world like the one depicted here? What kind of correction might still be coming, and what does that suggest you should maybe be paying attention to right now?
Definitely something to think about.